To our meeting of the Board of Health.
Have you started the recording?
Yeah, recording started.
Okay, I was about to say that this meeting is being audio and visually recorded. We have a lot on the agenda, but I want to start by asking, is there public comment that anyone would like to put forth at this time, not necessarily related to things that are on the agenda?
I have one in the chat room, or whatever it is. Michelle Perry. Okay, Michelle.
Go ahead.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Not too well, a little bit.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'll see what I can do about that. Thank you for taking this question. I know further in your agenda, you'll be talking about getting information online from the Board of Health, but I have a question now that the new bylaw is in place for the water testing for PFAS. Does this mean that when the paper posts houses that have been sold, the Board of Health will get copies of the testing results?
I'm happy to answer that.
Well, if it's not,
We'll be talking about that later tonight, but currently, if you do well water testing for PFAS and other contaminants related to a property sale, you are required to send those results to the Board of Health.
And will the Board of Health have copies of those on file then?
Yes, we will have those results. This is on the agenda for later. Yeah, I think we'll have good news for most people. But yeah, I suggest we leave that discussion for where it is on the agenda.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, let's keep going then. To approve the minutes from our last meeting. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Malcolm.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
just to remind you, since two of us are online, all votes will have to be taken by roll call.
I actually remembered that, Malcolm.
Thank you very much. My only question and comment on the agenda, I would strongly suggest that in the future we don't use first names. We tend to use first names in the meeting, but when we're doing the minutes, they really should be based upon our formal name. And also, if there is a correction to the past minutes, that does not have to be in the minutes of the meeting where we made that correction, as long as they're made in the previous corrected version. Thank you.
Okay. So since there are no comments or corrections or questions?
Carrie has his hand up.
Gary, yeah, hi.
Yeah, that's okay. Hi, Diane. I had sent Tamika, just there were a couple it's more like words and stuff that were screwed up on there, but I sent Tamika my notes about the corrections. So nothing substantive, just words that were in the wrong place or errors like that. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Can we approve the minutes? I think so. Motion to
Madam
approve.
Chair, I move the minutes are approved with the comments that I made and Carrie made.
I second.
Second. Okay, all in favor? Malcolm,
Aye.
Carrie,
Aye.
Meredith,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Ann says aye. Okay, minutes are approved, and we will go on to the next thing, which we've been waiting to hear for a bit, and that is the update of the Sanctity Head Caddy program to get them in compliance with the Massachusetts code.
Yeah, so Mr. Dave Hinman is on the line. Be able to speak in just a second. To just give us an update on his new facility and plans for the coming summer, if he has those to share. There was no variances requested from Sankaty Camp, so Mr. Hinman, if you're ready.
Sure. Thanks for having me today. Yeah, so the variance we asked for last summer to be open had to do with the distance between the bunks and the bunkhouses. They didn't meet the 4.5 foot requirement. We had two choices. One was to have fewer caddies this summer because we needed to move the bunks to be compliant, or two was to build a fourth bunkhouse, which is what we decided to do. So just to give you a little update on all of that, the first thing that has been completed is that the three old bunkhouses, which we call huts 1, 2, and 3. We have moved those bunks so that they are 4.5 feet apart. In one case, there actually are bunks that are further than 4.5 feet apart. And that is complete, and those are ready to go. So we used to house 19 in a bunkhouse, and this coming summer it will be 14 or 15 boys. The fourth hut, which we broke ground this fall and started the construction, it's about 75% complete. It's moving ahead on schedule to be completed by the end of April, and it'll be similar dimensions to the other three. We will also house either 14 or 15 kids in that hut. And one of the things that I just wanted to make clear is we're not changing the size of our program. It's still going to have the same number of kids involved. They're just going to be spread out a little more. So we'll have a total of 54 caddies, plus 6 additional counselors who also caddy and stay on and will help run the program. So that's how we get to the numbers that we're looking at. I think we're in good shape in terms of this project, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that people have.
Yeah.
Gary?
Yeah. And I just wanted to thank Sankaty Club for being responsive to the concerns we had as a Board of Health and regulations. And I know it's not easy. I know you had to do some hustling, but thank you for being responsive, and it's good for everybody. So thank you.
Yeah, and we feel the same way. And obviously this was a big project and not something we wanted to do, nor, as everything on Nantucket, it's so expensive, but we wanted to make sure that we were in positive standing, and we're excited to be back this summer. So thanks to everyone.
Thank you.
John, I just wanted to ask, because I don't remember all the details, was the separating the bunks the only issue that needed to be solved?
As I recall, yes, and
Okay.
a little help from Heather. Yeah, as I recall, that was the biggest, possibly the only variance, yes, that they asked for was the proper spacing between campers in the overnight dorms.
Okay. Well, great. That's wonderful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Now, number 5 is the public hearing notice for large events at private homes. And I think that will be complicated and perhaps take a long time. So do we want to take care of some of the things that might go more quickly and come back to that, or should we tackle that now, do you think?
That's up to you, Madam Chair, and I don't know if, is Greg Corbo on?
Yeah, Greg's
He's on.
a panelist, yep.
Whatever your preference is.
I think let's tackle it now and go forward with what needs to be said. So this is a public hearing. And I guess we'll let,
I can start,
Okay,
Madam
great.
Chair.
Do we need to
So
open the
this-
public hearing, or are we
The
already opened?
public hearing was opened last month.
it hasn't closed.
It has not
Okay,
closed. It's a
yeah.
continuation from last month. So this, just, there's some confusion when the packet was distributed. What you see in front of, what was in the packet was a modification or a proposed modification to the existing short-term rental regulations. And so what you were all distributed today was a colored copy so that you can exactly see what changes were being proposed, and that is up for discussion. Now, what was provided separately via Board Member Lepre was something that another town, I guess, had done on Martha's Vineyard. And so, but that is separate from what you see in front of you, which was developed by Town Council Greg Corbo. And so he had agreed to introduce this topic and the changes that he proposed. So, Mr. Corbo, I turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. And through you, Madam Chair. So yeah, just by way of background, the board has been, considering issues concerning large gatherings or events at short-term residential rental properties. And I was asked to assist you in developing a regulation that might address those situations. So just as way of background, under the town's bylaw, the Board of Health, with the approval of the Select Board, can enact regulations concerning short-term rentals to prevent those facilities from becoming a nuisance through unreasonable noise, overburdening of parking areas, and other nuisances. So what I did here was I took a look at your existing regulations and I added a new section that would address the issue of the use of short-term residential rentals for gatherings or activities that were not, for purposes of sleeping and habitation. And just to say up front, this is a suggestion of the types of things that you might consider putting in this. I am by no means telling you that this is the only way to do this or that everything here has to be exactly as it's said. So, the purpose of this really is to introduce the topic, give you a chance to see what it might look like, and then talk about, well, maybe we don't want to do this at all, or we want to do this and we like this section, but we don't like that section, or we think that this is good, but we'd want to change this a little bit or add that to it. So, I consider this at this point a working document, and I hope you do as well. And we can go through it with that view in mind, so that, I know that I've seen at least one email that some people might be upset about what's in here. And, that's certainly not my intention, but we had to start somewhere. And so I hope that this presents a good opportunity for you to see what your options are, and then we can have a discussion. So through you, Madam Chair, to the other members of the board, are there any questions about sort of process here?
Yeah.
Not
Carrie,
process.
Yeah, I guess my first question just is, how is this different from the large events in private homes? Because this seems to be kind of very similar to at least the intent, something happening in a place that's not designed for large events. But so we have one batch of regulations on the agenda for large events in private homes. And then we got a permit to, the short-term rental large events. So I'm a little, why isn't there just one regulation that applies to all?
So I think was it John who was talking earlier? I can't see everybody who's
Yeah.
there on my little box, but my understanding is that the document titled "Large Events in Private Homes" is not a current bylaw or regulation of the town of I'm a town in Nantucket. That is something that was proposed as a bylaw in the town of West Tisbury a couple of years ago. And I think that it was provided to you as another sample of how you might approach this problem. And if I'm not correct about that, please someone else clarify.
No, I submitted it because I thought that it would be useful in looking at what you wrote up in, they gave definitions and, no more than 50 guests or no more than an hour. So I felt like it gave really specific guidelines that the Vineyard is similar to Nantucket in our seasonal island community. So I thought that it would be helpful to have something that has already been done somewhere else to look at. However, this is talking about any events, and ours is being put into the short-term rental bylaw. So it's a little different, but I think it would give us some guidelines, because I think the crux of a lot of this is that there are very large events in private homes that are disrupting the neighborhoods. And it's not, for example, me having a big cookout at my house. It's someone renting out a house to have a wedding or some sort of event, and it's not the people that live there that are necessarily having the event, right?
That's correct. Yes. So I do think that Tisbury is a good starting place, and I certainly use that in putting my suggestions together. But I was keeping in mind the fact that yes, Tisbury was intended to apply to any residence, whereas we're only looking at short-term rentals at this point. And so I tried to fit it within the existing structure of what you have.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Malcolm?
Yes, in some ways, the Martha's Vineyard regulations are simple and straightforward. We have authority over short-term rentals. We wouldn't have authority over other houses, and this would have to be a select board issue if we went that way. In our last discussion, we sort of talked ourselves out of going outside of short-term rentals because we thought it would get complicated and confusing, and there are many parties on the island, and it would be how do you enforce them, et cetera. So I'm going to keep this in the back of my mind as we go through this discussion. So maybe the select board at some point would be interested in something like this, but let's finish our discussion and maybe loop back to this beyond short-term rental.
Yeah, I think that's wise. I also want to bring up something that I'm aware of, and which is that the Vineyard has 6 separate districts on it, and they are each governed separately. It's not one thing the way we are. And I thought that the thing that Meredith sent was for Edgartown. I don't know if that is one and the same with West Tisbury, but anyway, I think that the conditions in certain districts might be quite different than in other districts, and I'm not sure that we can actually have it as a parallel. But it is certainly something that to keep in mind. However, I agree with Malcolm that last time we talked about that our purview really needed to be short-term rentals, because that's really the only thing that we have, and even that is questionable, but that we have jurisdiction over. And so I wonder how I feel about this is that it has some really excellent things until we get down to E. So I wondered, and I don't know if everyone would agree with me, but I wondered if we could take the first A, B, C, and D one at a time and see if we would agree with those things. And if so, we could sort of check those off and then continue with the things that we might have some questions on.
Well, I have a question about B. Because it says no person shall charge admission to any gathering, whether or not they have a permit. And there are fundraisers on the island that rent out short-term rentals to have the event.
Well,
So they
let's
charge.
can we do A first?
Yeah,
and see?
that's fine.
Let's do A and see if we all agree on the definition that is what a gathering is. An assembly of any number of people in a short-term rental that are in addition to the approved capacity shown on the registration and who are not intended to be overnight guests. That seems,
Carrie has his hand.
Eric,
And again, I look at the comments from Steve Cohen. He had, we got an email earlier today. Essentially, I mean, anyone coming over for dinner would technically be a gathering. I mean, and my fear would be that could be used to harass, someone who was just having people over for dinner, but technically they're breaking the law because they had two people over for dinner and didn't have a permit, and the neighbor could say, well, they have a gathering. So I'm not sure if that open a statement is, or if we want to put a number that's, I mean, and again, Greg, this is where we need your guidance, but I mean, it seems so open that anyone who's not an overnight guest is considered a gathering.
that's a good point, Carrie. Greg, can you help us with this?
I can, yes. And this is certainly one of those places where, I had to throw out a concept of, what is going to be a gathering. And, I know that the one from the vineyard set a specific number of people. I think it was 100 or 50. And the problem that I had with that is that the number of people that you might consider to be overcrowding is going to be different based on the size of the rental, right? So if you have like a tiny bedroom cottage and there are 10 people there, right? That might have the same impact as 100 people at a 10-room estate, right? So no, I do think it's obvious, it's overburdensome to say any number of people above the registration, but the real trick is, so how do we define what that is so that we're sort of taking into account differences in sizes of the different places where these things might be happening.
Yeah, I mean, just Carrie again. Could we say something like this: double the number of the approved capacity? So
Okay.
if it's 6, then if there's 12 people, above double what the place is allowed to have. I mean, so it's concrete. It refers to a concrete number, but it grows with the capacity of the house. And also does allow that, you have a small place and you have 4 people over and your place is approved for 4 or 6, you don't got to get a permit, technically. So that's a suggestion.
I think we have to come up with some kind of language that protects a tenant, because that's what it would be, who's just having a dinner party or a birthday gathering or something like that, and not trying to have a large event.
I mean, the Vineyard one says event, a gathering, party organized at a private residence for nonprofit, educational, social, fundraising, celebratory, networking, promotional, or recreational purposes, including but not limited to weddings, birthdays, anniversaries, reunions, and similar occasions.
But does it give a number?
Yeah, and then it says in which more than 50 guests are simultaneously present for a period of time in excess of 1 hour.
But as somebody just said, if you have a tiny house and you have 50 people in it, that's quite a situation.
So couldn't we say double the number of people that the house is approved for? So if you have 6 bedrooms and you can have 12 people, if you have 24 people,
You're fine.
Well, if you have 6 bedrooms and you have 2 per bedroom, which is what it is, that's
Well,
that's
that's
12.
good.
And so you double that, you can have 24 people for dinner or for something. But what if you only have 2 bedrooms? That means you can have 8 people total?
Maybe 12, because isn't it 2 per room plus 2?
yeah,
So that would be 6 in a 2-bedroom. So if you had 12 people, you'd be allowed to have.
he's right,
2 per room.
plus 2.
Plus 2. And that's out of the
If it was
regulation.
a 6-bedroom house, you'd have 14.
Right,
So you really could have
14.
28.
Yeah.
Right, okay. I don't know, how does everyone feel about that?
I just feel funny about us being, someone telling people how many people they can have in their own home.
This is not your own home. This is a short-term
Oh,
rental.
just for the short-term rentals.
We're only talking short-term rentals here now.
Yeah, okay, but I get to the same thing, time and time again. How do you police it? Say they get the permit, they want 12 people, okay? Everyone says, okay, and it ends
don't
up
need a
someone
permit for
drives by and
12.
there's 40 people. What
But
do you do?
I think it's only going to be an issue if it's outside music disturbing the neighbors. It's not,
And 9 times out of 10, that's what it's gonna be.
right, if it's you having a cookout at your house, it's not going to affect you. But if I rent a short-term rental and have 50 people there, then I need to do something.
All right, okay.
So then if somebody's going to have a wedding at one of the many homes that host weddings, they would have to get one of these permits, so the neighbors would be made aware and they would have to stick to guidelines. And then you also know where are these places that are
Right.
having a lot of large events.
I also think that by even having it in the regulations, it will help to sort of send a message that don't do that. And if it was, so Greg, could we change the language in A?
So yes, we absolutely can. But before we get to that, I just wanted to address the comment, about how do we enforce this or how, and I'm not anticipating a situation, and I don't think you would be either, where, agents or police officers are going to be going door to door counting the number of heads in each short-term rental. But what I would expect is that if somebody has what ends up being a gathering, you're going to get complaints. You're going to get complaints about parking. You're going to get complaints about noise. And, that would then trigger an inquiry. And if it turns out that somebody is having, one of these gatherings or had one of these gatherings without first getting a permit from the Board of Health, the enforcement is, either the assessment of fines to the person who had the party, or ultimately, the suspension or revocation of the registration for the owner. And so the owner has a vested interest here in making sure that they make it very clear that parties are not allowed unless there's compliance with this. So, I wouldn't take this as, again, we're counting heads in every single short-term rental. It's really, I think, a matter of a complaint-driven process. And, like someone just said, that, the fact that it's in the regulations, the expectation is that people are going to comply. And, if you can get the rental community on board with informing their clients or their tenants that these are what the requirements are, I think that's going to help alleviate a lot of your problems.
Is there, will there be any responsibility if there are problems for the person that actually rents the house? Or is other responsibility would go to the owner of the house or to the person that rented it to the people that are having the party? Where does that responsibility go?
I think that's covered further down, Joe. What
Yeah, Madam
happened?
Chair, I didn't quite hear what was said. And then I have a comment.
Go ahead, Malcolm.
I wasn't quite sure what Jim said, but there's a loophole here. If I'm the owner of the house and I have not, in a sense, just rented it for a party, and I'm not renting it to someone else who's having a party, does that apply to this situation?
Not a
Like
short
if I rent my house and then, but I have this 50-person party or 100-person party, that's my private home.
But isn't that outside of our purview?
Well,
I mean, we're short-term rental, and is that a short-term rental technically?
Well, I thought we were on A, where we were trying to cover for a
Yeah,
dinner party that had, 12 people or 20 people or something like that, so that
I-
would not be considered a gathering. And
but
somebody had a good
Madam
idea.
Chair, but it goes
Twice
back
the
to
number.
the basic definition of basic, regardless of how many people we're talking about, who it applies to. I mean, if I have my house and it is listed as a short-term rental in my personal house, but I rent it out for a party, uh, is that's not covered the way we're talking about it, because it's not being used then as the short-term, it's being used as a rental for a party.
I don't know, Greg, but doesn't this revised thing that you did for us only apply to during the period of the short-term rental?
I would agree with that.
Using
So
your house for your private house for an event is a whole nother, comes under a whole nother thing, right?
I would agree. And I think we can clarify that that's what the meaning of this is. But, my position or opinion would be that even if you, rent out your house as a short-term rental, for half of the summer or even all of the summer, but you decide one weekend you want to use it yourself and have a party, you have every right to do that, and this would not apply. It, it,
I,
it
I agree. I agree, Mr. Garvel, but supposing I charge for the party, in a sense, instead of I'm using my short-term rental as a short-term rental for a party, not as someone to sleep at. That's where some of the issues have been.
yeah. So in that case, I would say then that it does apply because again, you're renting out the property, and it doesn't matter what you're renting it out for. If you
Okay.
rent it out to someone in exchange for compensation and they have whatever number we come up with, double the approved capacity, that's a gathering and they need a permit.
Okay. We'll have to write that very clearly
Okay.
because
And
that's
don't
where
forget,
we'll be
everyone,
challenged.
that this regulation does not necessarily prohibit these gatherings. All it says is that you have to get a
Yeah.
permit and we might put conditions on it.
Fine. So, sorry to interrupt, Madam Chair. Go on.
No, that's fine. I agree with everything that's been said, and I think For me, it helps to go one at a time, and for A, we need to put, I agree with Malcolm, very strict language, Greg, on how that's going to be, so that we do not restrict people having people over for, for a small event, for, not even an event, that's the wrong word, for a small gathering, a small dinner party, a small whatever, and that's not. So I think we need to have you tighten it up a little and then maybe come back to it when that has happened. But the intent seems to be, of the group, I think, that we want to protect people from being able to have, I guess what we need to do is to redefine the gathering, because how it is defined here is very strict. Only the people who are intended to be, the people who are sleeping in the house.
So, how about this then? In paragraph A, it would say, for purposes of this regulation, a gathering is defined as the assembly of any number of people in a short-term rental that would result in double the approved capacity shown on the registration and who are not intended to be overnight guests. This regulation does not apply to an owner who uses the house for their own purposes without compensation.
That seems fine to me.
That captures a lot of what we just talked about.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, B. Meredith has a concern on B.
It just says no person shall charge admission to any gathering, whether or not they have a permit. And I think there are fundraisers where they do charge. And is that different if they're doing it at a short-term rental? And I sort of liked what Edgartown had in here, that exempt from the requirements, and we don't have to do that, but was events sponsored by the town, an assembly of students sponsored by any public school located in the county, and assembly or gathering held for the sole purposes of exercising activities protected by the First Amendment or other articles of the Massachusetts Constitution. I don't know if we want to do that, but I do think like they are gonna, if it's a fundraiser, they're gonna charge admission. So do we need to say they can't charge?
Can we maybe, define, I'm thinking a lot of the organizations are non-for-profits, might be Fairwinds, or, a lot of those, they hold an event at a house and they charge admission or a donation. Is there a way to, like for non-for-profits or something like that, fundraising, just to kind of isolate them and say, yes, we understand that they do fundraising and this is how it happens.
So yeah, I mean, my intent here was, I guess, to address a situation, where someone like rents out a house and then has a cover charge for, as many people as they can fit in there. So yeah, I mean, we could take that out altogether, or, we can make it more narrow and say that, the charge would have to be limited to, not, I guess, fundraising for, a nonprofit organization.
Yeah, I think that would be good. Is there some way, some kind of wouldn't have to be a Nantucket nonprofit, but it would have to be an approved or registered, or what's the right word for that?
Like a registered
nonprofit.
501c3 or other.
I think 501c3 would cover everything you would need it to cover, because that's how, they get their tax exemption for the donations. So that, I think that would be furthering the intent of this, is if you limited admission to, or charging for admission to, nonprofit, entities for fundraising purposes. And as to some of this other language in Edgartown, you know, don't forget that Edgartown is a lot more broad than this, right? So or at least the one I'm looking at, right, was West Tisbury, but I think they're the same. And, that one applies to every single property in the town. So, yes, you have to exempt things like schools and First Amendment activities and things like that. But your regulation is much, much more narrow than that. And I think it's highly unlikely that the school would rent a short-term rental for purposes of having a student
That's
event.
totally fine.
Yeah. Okay, Greg, I think you've got the general
Yep.
idea of how we want to see that written in
Okay.
B. Now, C kind of addresses what Jim was talking about. Whose problem is it, right? And I guess what it's saying is that the owner makes it really clear when they're renting the place that this is not allowed. Is that what you mean, Greg? And then the owner is responsible for ensuring that the unit is not used for unauthorized gatherings.
Right. So
Talk about that a little bit more with us.
right. So, the purpose here is to give this some teeth by encouraging the owners to cooperate with you by putting the onus on them to prevent parties to the extent that they can. And so, we want to make sure that there are warnings going in, that that it's on the listing, it's posted at the property, that parties are not allowed unless you get a permit from the Board of Health. Because what we don't want to see happening is, have somebody just repeatedly renting out their place for gatherings and parties and then saying, whoops, sorry, it wasn't me, it was this renter from the other side of the country who we're never going to find again. And so and again, this is my opinion, and you're certainly free to craft this however you want, but I believe that, if you put the responsibility on the owner, you're much more likely to have compliance. And, this is the way that the liquor license regulations are written, where, the owner of the establishment is responsible for violations that go on there, whether they know about it or not. And there have been cases where, people have been doing, drug deals in a bar, and, the owner says, well, I wasn't there. I didn't know, that they were doing drug deals. And the courts have said, no, that's too bad. It's your responsibility to make sure that there's compliance. So that's the idea that I was going for. But I will defer to you as to however, you want to proceed here.
Let me ask you a question. How would it work if the owner used a real estate company and the real estate company rented the property to these people? Whose responsibility would it be then?
The owner.
Still the owner?
Yes.
It's their property.
They just use the realtor as a middleman, a broker, right?
All right.
I mean, I suppose there would be nothing to prevent you from putting something in here that says that, if there's a third party agency and, they fail to comply, with this requirement, that, they can, have some enforcement taken against them. I don't know if you issue any sort of license to them. Really, the only thing you could do would be fine them.
I mean, I kind of like the owner is responsible for their property. I mean, I think that's the most direct. Trying to capture everything in between that could possibly happen, it's going to make it very onerous. The owner is on record. We know who that is. They will have a short-term rental certificate. We know who to call.
And I think in the, obviously, we're getting to the next part where they're gonna need a gathering permit. And maybe when we decide on the, and that will come with a fee. I don't think that's gonna be for free. We also maybe would want to decide what the fine would be, but, or maybe not, I don't know. It's just, that would be one thing that we could consider so that the owner would know it would be not a small thing if it happened. So I think, is everybody kind of okay with C?
Yeah. And I think our understanding is that the owner is responsible. I mean, that's,
And that it needs to be very, made very clear to the tenant,
yeah,
both by the owner and, as Jim brought up, the realtor, that this is what
Right.
has to happen and this is what can't happen and all that, yeah. Maybe, Greg, you'd have to write up something that would be handed or would be included in a lease or something that, so that they would know that this is something that can't be done.
Sure. And, we could, maybe say that the owner has to, have the renter, check off a box saying that they read this and they understand that they can't have a party.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, I'm not sure, I'm not familiar enough with the short-term rental sites, Airbnb and Verbo and those. Is there a place where on the listing it would indicate that, gatherings require a permit or something like that? I mean, I'm not sure if that's, or if that's just getting too deep into the weeds.
I think they would have to go through the owner. The
Yeah.
owner or the real estate agent that lists it. I mean, there's a person on the other end that you pay and that you talk to, so. wouldn't that
Yeah.
make the
So,
person be
like
responsible?
on, Airbnb, right? You'll see a listing and then the owner gets to write a description,
Yeah.
and they'll describe how many bedrooms it has and where it's located. And I think we're requiring that they put in that description, please be advised that you are not allowed to have more than X number of guests without getting a permit from the Board of Health.
yeah,
Yeah.
that would be fine, I think.
And so I describe that as the rental advertisement. I mean, we could try to be more specific, but my intent was to capture not only the sites like Airbnb and VBRO, but if you post it with a real estate agent or even you take out an ad in the newspaper, you'd still have to do that.
I think,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that makes a lot of sense to put it in, right there, right up front, in everything that's, in every possible way. All right, D. Now, D has 4 parts to it, I guess.
Madam Chair, there was a member of the public with a comment.
Oh,
I
I'm
don't know
sorry.
if we're taking comments at
go
this
ahead,
time
please.
from the, hold 1 minute. Okay, Kimberly?
Hi there. This is Kim Reed. I own a catering company on the island. And let me know if you can hear me, number one. I'm not a big zoomer.
No, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Trying to be difficult here, but I'm listening to all of these comments and whatever, and it's not just because what it is that I do for a living, but I'm really trying hard to understand why everyone's gotten into what people do at their houses. And I guess I have a question. I'm not trying to stir open a bigger can of worms, but let's just say, for example, I have a client on Easton Street that does not rent their home ever. And they have a cocktail party for 150 people for 2.5 hours on their back lawn. And next door, there's somebody that do rent their home. Um, and those people have been coming for years and years and years and have met like a lot of people over the years that want to entertain there. Why is this all a big focus on people that rent their homes or not? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's kind of distinguishing to some degree between like the haves and have-nots. And I think that's become really uh not something that people are really liking on Nantucket. So people are gonna, you know, well, not most people, but some people are gonna complain like, oh, I couldn't, park on the street. Well, a lot of these houses where these gatherings are happening, that are the larger houses, because I've obviously worked in many of them, have parking or people are brought in for somewhere else. And I'm just wondering, like, how many places are we talking about other than the one right now in reference on South Shore Road, that people are still having a problem with just the property overly being used for gatherings, so that something came around that all of this stuff needed to be done, because it really it kind of does do a major disservice to people that cater and other people that are involved in doing parties, which bring in a lot of money on Nantucket. And I just, quite frankly, I don't understand how this has become such a big deal.
Madam Chair.
Would you like to reply to that, Greg?
Yeah, at least part of it. I'll leave some of the more policy stuff to you guys. But when we first talked about this, we started off by discussing whether this was going to apply to all residents or just short-term rentals. And it was decided that it was only going to be short-term rentals for, I think, a very valid reason. And that is that if you are the owner of a home and you live there and it's yours, you have a lot more accountability to your neighbors and to the town than a person who is coming in for the weekend to hold a huge party and then leaving and never coming back. And the thought was that if this is your place and you live there, you're going to be respectful of your neighbors and you're going to pick up the phone or go over and say, hey, I'm having this big party, I hope it doesn't bother you. We'll do the best we can to keep the noise down. And if you can't get along with your neighbors, you're going to have other types of issues. And so, we thought it was an issue of accountability, and I agree with that approach. The other topic that you brought up was, well, some of these places are so big that they don't have a parking issue, or it's going to hurt, caterers or the party business. And we still need to keep in mind that nothing in this regulation outright prohibits these gatherings or the use of short-term rentals for parties or gatherings. All it does is require you to come in front of the Board of Health to get a permit to make sure that your gathering is not going to create a nuisance. And so if you come in and say, hey, I'm going to have 500 people at this short-term rental and we have more than enough on-site parking for it, you're going to likely get the permit that you're looking for. It's really only, to prevent the situations where, you have people, lining up cars on both sides of narrow roads and parking on their neighbors' lawns because they don't live here and what do they care? And, having all kinds of noise at all hours of the night, overburdening septic systems. Those are the kinds of things that we're looking out for. I don't believe that the board is looking to prevent or shut down the party business in any way.
Hmm. Um, it's interesting because when you talk about the obtaining permits and things of that nature, I think what a lot of people don't understand, because I certainly don't, and I've been living on Nantucket since 1988, but a lot of people in the summertime, whether they're owners of their own home or renters, they do things at the last minute. You know, if you're a renter and you go out for dinner a couple times and you run into a bunch of people from where you came from, and you're like, oh, let's put together a party. And then they call me or whomever, and you know, with 2 days notice. Like, how do you then, all the time that happens, how do you then, you know, in between doing all the other stuff that one does to try to earn a living in a very short period of time, when you're in this sort of business, how do you have time to fill out permits, and you know, it's not a time that the board meets, or you know, whatever. I see that being a problem, and I just still, you know, in it, I'm just going to just repeat one more time. You know, I don't know how a person that owns their house next to someone that's renting their house out to someone that's paying, you know, whatever for it, you know, how their house is going to make less noise when they're present than somebody that's staying next door that's renting. Like, that's what I'm really having a hard time understanding.
Well, thanks for your comments. John, were you getting ready to say something?
Oh,
didn't
I was
know.
just going to say, you know, I think in the guise of time, we maybe want to try and avoid the back and forth and try and
Right,
focus on
absolutely. I think there's someone else with their hand up.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Malcolm.
maybe a suggestion that we go through all the lists and then take public comments
All
all
right,
at once.
that works. I think that works.
Just my suggestion,
Okay, let's do that then.
because
All right, so
otherwise
we're on,
we may be here till midnight.
yeah, we're on D. And I think that Greg brought up a wonderful point a few minutes ago, which is that this is not about not permitting a gathering. This is to ensure that they come and get a permit and that it is known what's going on and all of that. So I think D addresses that, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, I'm looking at D, I'm particularly D3, about the containing the notarized signature of the owner. The owner may not be anywhere near here. And is there a way we could make this technologically based, that like the woman, like Kimberly has suggested, as things happen quickly, that's an online registration and form, and you know, at least it's documented in our, you know, an easy way for people to register, put the information about number of guests, blah, 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 that's on here. But the idea of having a notarized signature of the owner, who may be in Washington, D.C., Dallas, Texas, or, you know, Malibu, seems somewhat onerous.
So I would defer to others on the issue of, you know, technology. But, you know, the intent here is to make sure that, you know, if it's not the owner who is applying for the permit, but the occupant, you want to have some verification that the owner approved this. And it goes back to our prior point of the owner being responsible. Well, it wouldn't be fair to make them responsible if the tenant, or if the occupants could, you know, have these parties without the owner even knowing. So, you know, if it's the occupant that's coming in and applying, there needs to be, in my opinion, a requirement that you can verify that the owner has approved themselves.
Yeah.
You know, I think a notarized signature is the most obvious way to do that because it can't be forged. But I would be open to other avenues. You know, I know that, like, you know, you can do an electronic signature through like Adobe PowerPoint and probably other things. So I mean, we can, you know, we could definitely massage the language there, but I do think it's important that if it's not the owner coming in themselves, that you have a way to verify that they have actually approved.
Okay.
I would think that there was a way, if this owner is in Timbuktu, that they would have an authorized agent that could sign on their behalf. Would that be correct, Greg?
Yes, as long as you know who that is up front.
Right, so that would have to be in the initial agreement, rental agreement, I would guess.
Yeah, that could be the person who has to be on island for instant access for any short-term rental. Could we have that as part of the regulation, that there has to be someone who can respond within 2 hours? If, yeah, that the owner has to have someone on island who can respond within 2 hours to deal with complaints or concerns. So that agent, could that agent act, potentially could the owner authorize that agent to act on his behalf for gatherings too? Is a question, I think.
I have a question. If it comes to the point where things get out of hand, is there some way that there's going to be a fine put on? And if there is there any way to do that when they do the rental up front?
So yeah, we're going to talk about enforcement options. And I do think that a fine is going to be part of that. And I do think that we could say that, you're not allowed to book another rental until all your fines have been paid. And the other part of it was that, if you're, a repeat offender, there will be the option of taking away their short-term rental registration.
Okay. So will there be a section on fines, Greg, when we have a finalized thing here?
So at this point, I put this down at the end in 338-9.
I would think that you would have something stated that if there is a fine, the fine will be twice the rental. So that if you tell the people and they know upfront before they rent the house, that if there is, time and time and time again, someone's got to go out there, that they're going to be fined, and let them know upfront if that happens, the fine will be twice what the rental was.
It's gotta hurt.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Can't be $100.
No.
Yeah. Carrie?
Yeah, and I'm looking at D4 about the parking plan approved by the chief of police. How long does it take to get a parking plan approved by the police department? I've never done it, so speaking from lack of experience.
It's,
So again, it's just
Chair,
something to consider.
I think at some point we need to, if we go farther with this, at some point we need the police chief to review this, because
Yes.
in August, you're not going to get a parking plan approved rapidly.
Yeah. So,
I mean, if it's one of the homes that has, if they say that there's plenty of parking, they wouldn't need a parking plan approved, right?
no, the application shall include, I'm just reading what's here, and again, this is a first draft. But the application shall include a parking plan approved by the chief of police or their designate. So, but just, I think we need to massage that or something. We got to put it so it's in reality in terms of turnaround time, and also is a parking plan needed if it's a large enough piece of property that can handle itself. I mean, so, that's all. I just don't know how long it takes. I'm assuming it's not an instantaneous thing to get a parking plan approved. That's all.
So yeah, this is definitely something that we can work on. I think the concern that I was trying to address is, what is going to be the ability of the Board of Health's agents to decide what constitutes a sufficient amount of parking, either if it's on site or, more importantly, if it's on the street. And, you may say, they may come in with a plan to you and say, yeah, I can cram 100 cars on the front lawn, but then the police department or even the fire department would say, no way, that's crazy. There's no way you'd get 100 cars in there. And, it's going to create a disaster while all of these 100 cars are trying to get out off of that tiny lawn. So, it was trying to find a measure of input, but if you don't think that that is feasible, that's something that we can take out and have, the board's agent or the board itself assessing, whether or not there's enough parking.
I think it's pretty important that it be left in. I do. And I wonder if there should be a fifth, which is that this application for permit has to be done a certain amount of time before this gathering / event takes place. I'm not sure that you can just say 2 days before the gathering that you want to have 100 people on Thursday night. Had you thought of that, Greg?
Don't know if I was thinking about that, but I do think that that is an important point to address.
I just don't think it's fair, especially during a busy time of the year, to ask people to be able to drop everything and decide whether, XYZ can have a permit, and knowing that a lot of things have to be coordinated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I didn't put something in like that in there, but I agree with you that that would be a reasonable thing to require.
Okay.
And I mean, does anyone have a suggestion of what that time frame should be?
5 days? Is that enough? I don't know.
Well, again, we're talking about short-term rentals. So short-term rentals could be 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 14 days. So, I guess are we trying to prohibit or just trying to have it so that they aren't disruptive? And if we're trying to prohibit, we can put a very long lead time on it. If we're trying to make it so that they fit in with the community and are not disruptive, it, a shorter time, I think, is fair, but that's just my opinion.
So one thing to consider is whether these permits are going to be granted or decided on by the board or staff. Because if it's going to be decided on by the board, now you're looking at least 48 hours excluding Saturdays, Sundays, legal holidays. And, are you going to be willing to schedule special meetings every week to address these permits?
The Tisbury one has 45 days on their example. The one we have from, I think it was Tisbury, says at least 45 days before the proposed event. So, I mean, that's what that town did, long term. But again, that's not a short-term rental one, that's for the whole town.
Yeah, if you're a short-term rental, you're less than 30 days, so that doesn't really work.
Yeah.
Well, but don't forget, it's not tied to the length of the rental itself, right? You can, if you're going to, let's say, book this place now for the summer, you can get your permit in, right? More than 45 days before the actual party, right? That would only be a hindrance to someone who decides they want to have an impromptu party while they're here.
Right.
Most people that are planning a large cocktail party or a wedding or a birthday
A nonprofit thing, yeah.
are going to be planning it well in advance.
So 2 weeks, 30 days?
Well, also it goes back to Greg's question of who is the one that's going to approve it? Is it a staff approval or the board itself? I mean,
Can I jump in here?
Yes, please, Rodney.
So I just want to, with respect, remind the board that we are a small department and with a lot of other regulatory responsibilities that are required by the state. Very little of this here is public health related.
Exactly.
And when I have to drop a public health activity
Right.
to issue a permit or do something associated with enforcement or fines, that takes away from our public health mission. So as you consider what the staff has to do, just please keep that in mind.
Well, that opens up a whole can of worms that's way bigger than any of this, I think.
Well, Madam Chair, could I speak? I think this whole, the more I listen to this, the more complex. It's like a colleague of mine said, making regulations and it's like making sausage. This is another example to me of why short-term rentals enforcement regulations does not belong in the health department or the Board of Health.
You're absolutely right.
Absolutely.
I think we need to proceed with this and I mean, this should not be put on the health department. But let us continue and that we'll have to deal with at the end of this, but this is not a health issue. It is, I could make an argument it's a health issue, noise, pollution, septic, et cetera, but let's just go on with the process and see where we go. I'd suggest we go on with the process. Here's some bit from the public, and then obviously we'll have to continue this hearing for another meeting or two.
Isn't there a position for somebody to run the short-term rentals?
There's one position that's been approved, but it's going to be running the registry and helping out in certain areas, but it's one person. And that has not been finalized yet for the budget for next year, but that is the current plan, yes.
Because couldn't that person be responsible for these permits and say, I mean, we can say 30 or 45 days. I mean, somebody throwing a large event is gonna.
Yeah, again, I think this is a bigger job than I think what it's being envisioned. I mean, even just the permitting alone involving the police department and the fire department, we don't issue liquor licenses. So all that stuff has to be coordinated in addition to running the registry. So I think this is just a bigger task than.
Yeah, I do
than
too,
what
and
you're anticipating.
I think as far as, I think Malcolm and Rocky and everybody has brought up a very good point about whether it really should be under the Board of Health and whether it is interfering
And the
with
other
other
thing here-
functions that do have to do with public health and safety. So we'll have to come to a conclusion at some point on that. But I
The
guess,
other question I have is, it says right here that you're gonna have to have a parking plan approved by the chief of police.
or there, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think the chief of police is gonna have time in the middle of the summer to lay out a parking plan?
Well, if he-
And if he
if
lays out a
she,
parking plan
he,
to
she
discuss some public roads,
Has 30 days.
who's
per
gonna
house.
say that those spaces won't be taken up by somebody else? I mean, how can you guarantee
Clearly
somebody a
with
parking
some
plan?
time, if they knew this was something that was gonna happen, they
But
could.
this is gotta be done before you get the permit. How are you gonna guarantee someone 45 days before they get here that the chief of police is gonna guarantee them a parking permit and lay it out with, this has to be approved by the chief of police or the designee? So someone's gotta lay it out, the chief has gotta approve it. How are you gonna do that 45 days? Tell someone in 45 days, this is where you can park.
Well, I think it's to prevent them from parking illegally, blocking roads, making it more difficult for the police or fire to get to an event or get to something if if a road is blocked. I think like we saw South Shore Road blocked this summer. I mean, I just think there needs to be, and honestly, I think that the most large events are going to have a plan for parking. If you're having a wedding for 150 people, you're gonna have a plan for parking, or you're gonna bus everyone in. So I don't think this is that, like, they're gonna say, this is our plan. Everyone's gonna park at this spot. I went to a fundraiser 2 years ago. You went and parked here, and then you got on in a
bus, a little
van,
shuttle,
and it took
yeah.
you, and that's their parking plan. Like, these people, they are going to have to have thought of this. And they're going to have to come here and say, this is what we're gonna do. Great, sign off.
Well, if you look at E, let's look at E, I think we should. Require a gathering permit, subject to conditions it deems necessary to further the intent of this regulation and the town's short-term rental bylaw. Now, it's talking about limiting the guests, limiting the hours, limiting or restricting the use of outdoor speakers, alcohol, licensed caterer for the alcohol. Now this speaks to what we've been talking about, the cars, limiting the number of vehicles, requiring a police detail. And the other, on E, and 5, under E has shuttle, which is what Meredith was just talking about. If you gotta use another site, you would bring people back and forth if it's not real close, in a shuttle. So, these are all really, I think, important points. However, the question is, who decides? I mean, how do we?
The answer to your question is, it should not be our job. It should
Well,
not
Rock is
be,
telling
it
us
should
that
not
he
be the Board
hasn't
of
got the
Health's job.
staff.
Okay, we're not gonna get rid of it tonight. We're
No,
not
I
gonna
know.
get rid of short-term rentals anytime soon, I don't think. So I feel like we have to have a plan. Now, maybe we say it's 30 days and they have to come to every Board of Health meeting and that's what we have to do right now, or, I mean, I think that would make people very unhappy. But, I mean, we can't just say we're not gonna do anything because we don't wanna deal with short-term
Oh,
rentals.
I agree. I'm
No,
not saying
no,
that.
I'm not
So,
saying,
none of us
no,
are saying that.
I'm saying somebody else should be doing this job, someone else in town. And I said that from the very beginning. We should have never let them dump that on the Board of Health. Never.
Can this go through the licensing department?
Well, Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, sir.
So Culture and Tourism Office has taken over events now from licensing, kind of. For events, that's kind of all in the works right now, and it's kind of in a process of being able to apply online. So we've been having meetings at least once a month about that. So I kind of want to try and consult with them maybe, or invite them to a meeting and try and get their feedback on how this all works, because an event is going to require a permit through their department approval already, if it's a short term or, a primary residence. So I don't know if there's a way we incorporate short-term rental in with that stuff.
They would only
so.
need a permit if it's their house, if they're putting up a tent or something though, correct?
Any large event should have a license to serve alcohol, for
Right.
instance, or music or something like that. Yeah, so.
I think that's a really good idea. I also think that let's take a look at E, just not who's gonna do it, but do we think that the 7 things that are in here are important, and is there something else that needs to be added to that?
Madam Chair, before we get too far off of the question that was raised a minute ago, I just wanted to address the parking and the role of the police department. certainly we wouldn't expect the police chief themselves to be, issuing these permits or approving plans, but it should, we don't want to step on the chief's toes and say they have to, appoint this person or that person. They should be able to appoint whoever they want. And the reason is not necessarily to guarantee someone that they're going to be able to park on a street. It's more, for the police department, or someone with, the expertise to say, no way can you fit 150 cars on that street. And, I can't approve your plan. You're going to have to do something off site, like a shuttle, or, no, you can't fit 150 cars on that lawn. It's too small. That's what we're kind of looking for, from the police department, not necessarily for them to put their stamp on it and say, yeah, you're approved to park X number of cars on the street. It's more the opposite of that, for the police department to be able to say, no, this street can't handle that.
I don't think they'll have the time or the people to do it. I really don't. They're gonna be so busy during the summer that, this is gonna be way, way down on their list.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Malcolm?
I would suggest we kind of keep moving on, because we could, I mean, John made a good point. There is another group that's going to be doing events, and perhaps with their permission and their discussion, and once we meet with them, we may make the rules, and we may authorize them to actually carry them out, which we could do. They could be our agent if they wanted to, and if it works out. So I don't think we should get stuck on this right now, because this is an issue that's going to take a lot more work. I would just keep moving.
Do you suggest we look at F, G, and H, or should we just conclude this and ask for public comments if there are any right now?
Well, we've been at this for how long now? An hour, and
An hour and, well, 10 minutes?
maybe we take public comment for about 10 minutes, and then we continue talking about this at the next meeting.
Okay.
Because I have a hard break at 7. I'm sure you're doing fine without me. You can deal without me, but I would just think we're starting to go around in circles on this issue.
I agree.
I have one hand raised if you're taking public comment.
Yeah. Yes, go ahead. Patrick.
Hi, Patrick Ridge. I really appreciate all the conversation and the great deal of effort that's been put in this. Can you guys tell me, besides South Shore Road, how many complaints that the board received for parties at short-term rentals? And also if the staff is supportive of these regulations?
John and Rocky, do you have any?
It's a public comment. Do you want to respond in writing, or how do you?
No, this is actually no, we could respond. This isn't public comment. This is a hearing. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not a hearing. I'm sorry. I'm getting
It's a public hearing. It's a public hearing, yeah.
yeah. So we can respond.
Okay.
I mean,
So I
I
guess-
can respond, then Rocky can. I mean, I don't know if any specific complaints. I get a lot of unofficial complaints from people about disruptive rentals in their neighborhood. And I also have heard unofficially of other people thinking of doing things such as South Shore.
And I don't have anything to add as far as specific numbers.
John, do you know anything?
The same, I don't know specific complaints, it's,
Can I ask a quick question that maybe ties in? This is Carrie, Madam Chair. And maybe it's a question for Greg, but is the South Shore thing up before a judge, coming before a judge? I mean, will there be some other decision from another body that impacts this whole discussion?
I'm sorry, I'm not aware of the specific instance on Shore Road or whether there's any litigation or anything.
Okay.
Yeah, the zoning board of appeals discussed it and kind of split on that issue. That was specific to that specific
Right.
location. But again, I have a lot of people tell me they're tired of rock and roll on their streets.
Patrick, are you wanting to comment further?
Yes, it's hard for me to understand how much regulation I think that is needed if we don't understand how large the size of the problem is. And specifically, what's being said is noise. And I think the town already has a noise ordinance in place that's adhered to for 10 o'clock. And then my second question that I asked the first time was, is the staff of the Board of Health feel that this regulation is necessary beyond the board members, Rocky and John at all?
This is Rocky, and I think there are limitations to what we can do. I think that was my main point that I was making, and obviously our focus is public health, and the many regulatory requirements that we are tasked to do. It's difficult to add things on, and particularly when they are not public health focused. It takes away from being able to complete our mission on so many other fronts that we work towards.
I think that obviously this is not something that we can resolve completely tonight. I do not think that the Department of Health or the Board of Health intends to be punitive. We are intending to give guidelines to prevent, and I would say that it is not just the one incident that we have all heard so much about, but it is preventing future problems that could crop up, that could affect the health and safety of the citizens of Nantucket, having to do with street safety, having to do with emergency vehicles being able to get through in a neighborhood, having to do with any number of things that could. So I think the idea of having a registration for large events is a good idea, but how it will be carried out clearly needs more refinement.
I agree with that 100%.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I move that we continue the hearing till next month.
I second that.
Second,
Okay. All in favor? Meredith?
aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Malcolm?
Aye.
Carrie?
Aye.
Ann says aye. All right, we will continue it. Greg will tighten up a couple of things that we talked about in the first part, and we'll, hopefully, John will be able to pull together some of those other participants that would maybe be able to talk with us and think it through.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I just want to confirm. So you do want me to continue on with drafting to address the things that we talked about today?
Yes, please. We're on number 6, which is 63 Cato Lane, release of betterment loan.
Yes, so included in the package is documentation of payment in full for the betterment loan that was associated with 63 Cato Lane. So requesting from the board a motion to release the lien on the property that was put in place.
Motion to release the lien.
Second.
All in favor? Jim?
Aye.
Meredith?
Aye.
Ann? Yes. Malcolm?
Aye.
Carrie?
Aye.
Lien is released. Number 7 Arkansas Avenue, Nantucket Harbor watershed variance.
Yeah, I have the engineer. If he wants to talk, I'll allow him to talk.
I'm here.
No.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I keep working, so you don't get to see me today, but thanks, John. This property actually was originally approved back in 2018. Thanks to Sean's detective work, he pulled this up and found that the system was never installed. Originally, the system was installed or designed to accommodate a proposed addition. Wasn't due to a failure or anything. And the addition has been, I think, mostly completed. And so now they're getting ready to put the system in. So we've resubmitted the plan, updated the variances just with the new sections. But what we're looking at is typical Nantucket variances to property lines. Rather than 50 feet, we have 30 feet and about 17 feet. This is in an area that's still served by wells. So if you see the plan, you can see we're very limited where we can go with all the 150-foot well radiuses around us. So we're also asking for a variance not to have a reserve area, which is pretty typical on these smaller lots. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, it's almost that this is bringing up a better situation, as Don pointed out, with the wells in the area. The leach field's been located in an area that's the best possible spot that it could be, not affecting anyone else as well. And of course, they're installing an IA, so I don't see a
Seems,
detriment to the environment from, as an improvement from what exists.
it seems that we should go forward, correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll make a motion to approve.
okay, Jim?
Second.
All in favor? Jim?
Yes.
Meredith?
Yes.
Malcolm?
Aye.
Carrie?
Aye.
And yes. Okay, that's taken care of. Number 8, 16 Ridge Lane, Nantucket Harbor watershed variance.
Yeah, this is also Bracken Engineering.
Yep. Hi again, Don Bracken. This is almost similar to the last project. The system's not in failure, but the owners would like to put on an addition, which will trigger them to have to upgrade the system. It's an old system with a 1,000-gallon tank and leaching pit. So we're proposing a new IA system and new soil absorption system. So again, it's variances to the Nantucket setbacks for 50-foot setbacks. This is just a 10,000 square foot lot. So we're looking at basically be in compliance with Title V with 10.5-foot setbacks. We were able to fit a reserve area on the plan. So the Nantucket variance we need for that is the 15-foot separation required between the primary soil absorption system and the reserve area. In this case, we're butting the reserve area up to the primary area, which is typically what we do in other sections of town and complies to Title V. This area is served by town water. The site is currently served by an individual well, but as part of this upgrade, they are going to connect to town water. There is a neighbor to the west, it's number 18, that still does have a well. So we can't meet the Nantucket 150-foot separation there. We can be 102 feet away. So we're asking for that variance as well. We think it's, again, the best upgrade with the conditions that we have for the property. Thank you.
Hearing. Okay. So my question would be, this is a 3-bedroom? If I understand it right?
Correct. 3-bedroom, and there's no plan for any increase in the number of bedrooms. The additions are going to be increasing first floor space.
Can there be a deed restriction put on to 3-bedroom?
I would say I don't think it's necessary. I mean, the permits are only going to be for 3 bedrooms, and it's going to be on record at the Board of Health. We typically don't put any deed restrictions on 3 bedrooms. Usually it's for the 2-bedroom system or something less than that. In my opinion, there's enough of a record for it. I don't think anyone in that situation would be able to increase the number of bedrooms, without anybody actually knowing it. I think that would probably set an odd precedent from what's already the way it's been done, or what would have to be done in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is an overall improvement, and any new construction or building application should be reviewed by our office, by our regulation. So that should be the
It says it's going
case.
to be for 3 additions. 3 additions to the property. What are the additions? Are they bathrooms?
I haven't seen the proposal for that, but by the Chapter 332, they're required to submit the building application to our office for review to make sure that it would work
So
with
what is he
the.
asking for right now? Yes, for us to approve it now?
Not the additions. We'd have to review the building applications individually to make sure that they're compliant with the septic that's going to go
My
in the
question is,
3-bedroom
so
system.
He's taken out a 3-bedroom, was put in a new 3-bedroom.
Yes, an IA,
So
yep.
none of the, if there's 3 bedrooms in there now, what are the 3 additions going to be?
It's right here.
Are they bedrooms?
Well, they can't be.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we'll have to do a room count when the applications are submitted to our office.
Okay.
I think he said they were enlarging the floor space, right?
Yeah,
And
as
you'll
we'll go down the line
on
to
that.
our definitions and everything, room counts and everything, but, that might be a sun porch or something. I don't know at this point.
So do we approve it conditionally, that it's not,
Well,
any-
yeah, we'd approve it. I mean, it would be the septic design that we're approving and the variances that you would approve, but we would have to review the building application to approve any new building on the property to make sure it's compliant
Is the
with this
existing
system.
system bad?
I don't, this
Why
is
does-
just,
Why do they want to change it?
No.
I'll let Don
Don?
answer.
Yeah, no, the system is functioning. It hasn't failed or anything. It's just that they know that they need this step to get this approval before they finish their plans and then submit for an actual building permit application. Typically, I haven't looked at it, but I think someone else in my office has already looked at what they plan on doing to sort of make sure that it's still going to be considered a 3-bedroom. Most people ask us to do that. So I think, like John said, at the end of the day, it's got to be proven to only be 3 bedrooms when the application gets to his desk, or he won't approve it. So
so
Yeah.
how do we, what kind of a motion do we need?
Well, I mean, I'd feel you'd just approve the variances the way that it's submitted. I mean,
Okay.
aside from any building, which will be reviewed later, this is an improvement to the area, in my opinion. So, but any building application does need to be approved by our office.
Okay.
If they're not, they're in violation of that, and we've mailed a few letters
Okay.
on that, so.
Madam Chair, I move we approve the variance as submitted.
Do I have a second?
Second,
Okay, all in favor? Jim?
Yes.
Meredith?
yes.
Ann? Yes. Malcolm?
Aye.
Carrie?
Yes.
Okay, that variance is approved. And
Thank
number
you.
9, Nantucket Community Sailing.
So Nantucket Community Sailing is requesting a variance, and I'm not sure if the business owner is either here or
Yeah,
online.
she's here.
Oh, okay. She'd like to speak, and representing the health department will be Heather.
I'm Diana Brown from Nantucket Community Sailing, and thank you for having us on the agenda. We are here to request one variance this year. Last year when we were here, we came asking for 7 variances. It was our first time going through the recreational camp application process. I do want to thank John and Heather for all of their help for getting us through last year, and then this year, the process has been much easier and much more streamlined, so thank you very much for that. This year, we are asking for one of the main variances we asked for last year, which is we believe that the lifeguard certification is not as appropriate for our sailing instructors as the U.S. sailing instructor certification process is. And what we believe and what U.S. Sailing wrote in their letter of support, which is part of our variance request, is that the lessons and instruction that our sailing instructors are taught when they go through the certification process is all about how to rescue children from the water. If they fall out of a boat, if the instructor's in a boat in the water next to them, how do you rescue a capsized boat? How do you rescue a child who has fallen into the water? And that's what they learn as part of their U.S. sailing certification process. We believe that is the benchmark in the industry for safety in teaching sailing, and we believe it's the best way to go. And so we're requesting your support for that variance.
You want health department input?
Yeah. We,
Do you want health department input?
we do. I think we got in our packet
Okay.
some letters and things like that, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Heather?
Hi, I'm Heather Nardoni, Health Inspector. So pretty much everything I'm going to say I included in a recommendation. I do believe that the course that they do is very valuable and important, and it should be done. But I don't, and we don't really see it as synonymous with lifeguarding. What's included in boating safety was included in their letter, and I broke down what is included in lifeguarding. The specific differences are swimming abilities, and the ability of rescue after someone has already drowned is different than just the ability of pulling somebody out of the water. Last year, we had the discussion about, well, if someone's on the beach, how are they going to help us? But really, it's going to be, this lifeguard would be on the boat. And with them having 2 different locations, I do think that it would be best that they have a lifeguard both on the Juddy's location and the Pulpus location. Thank you.
Did anybody other than me read the letter and the information from U.S. Sailing and everything? Does anyone have any
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Carrie
Heather,
here.
did you want to follow up?
No, I just didn't know
Okay.
if there was any other questions.
Carrie?
Yeah, and that just kind of goes back to, I think, probably what I said last year, which is the sailing certifications equivalent to lifeguarding? And again, so between what the sailing letters, their association, their detail, and Heather's breakdown, I still feel that lifeguarding is saving people's lives. And those are a very specific set of skills. And to have someone out on a boat that has the boating certification and lifeguarding certification just seems to make a lot of sense to me. It can be the same person, doesn't have to be another staff person, but to have staff who are trained have the lifeguarding, which is more about almost more approaching first responder type skills versus just getting someone out of the water and being an effective teacher. So, I mean, I've read both things several times, and this goes back to our discussion last year, and I still stand. I think that I feel that the lifeguarding is a critical skill, and I would hope that they could get some of their sailing people trained as lifeguards so we don't have to deal with this.
I think what they're saying is that the training that their instructors have, three of my children have done it. I know what they were, how they were trained. They are trained in CPR. They are trained in all of that. They are also very knowledgeable about sailing. Whether a lifeguard would have better skills, I'm not convinced that they would. Do you want to speak on that a little bit, Diana?
Just a bit. Our sailing instructors are all first aid and CPR trained, as are lifeguards. And and also all of our instructors and all of our sailors, our students, are wearing life jackets at all times on the water. And that is a requirement for us in terms of safety. And in a typical swimmer situation, a swimmer is not wearing a life jacket. That's not to say that accidents don't happen in the sailing world at large, because they do, but we have never encountered anything like that. What is important for our sailing instructors is that they know how to cut someone loose, they know how to cut a line off a boat if a student gets tangled in a line. They know how to stop the boat and stabilize it. If a child is being dragged behind a boat, they know how to get the child out of the water. And because the child is wearing a life jacket, their head's above the water already. So I think that there are some important differences in the skill set that our instructors have. And last year, when I presented this to the Board of Health, Dr. McNabb asked that U.S. Sailing specifically identify and support our sailing certification. And I just wanted to read you one sentence, because what they said is, while lifeguard training is appropriate in a contained setting where campers are swimming in a pool or off a beach, it is not as effective in a sail training setting. Sailing instruction normally occurs away from shore, and the instructor oversees the activity from a powerboat. U.S. Sailing's training specifically addresses how to remove sailors from the water and how to rescue capsized boats, neither of which are covered within a lifeguard's training.
Right. And again, I'm just going to go back to, is it feasible for a person who has gone through the certification of sailing to also have gone through all those other skills that a lifeguard has and get lifeguard certification? That's really all I'm asking.
It seems like they get a lot of the same stuff because they get the CPR and the first aid, and then instead of a focus on rescuing people who are in the water by the shore, or they're getting a training on what to do if you're out in open water and someone falls off the boat or has an event or the boat capsizes, which I would think, and they get a lot of training, rather than, because I did think last year, like, that's great, there's a lifeguard on the beach, but if you're out in a boat, you don't want the lifeguard on, you don't want the
Yeah, they
person,
could
you want
be-
the person
they
that's
could be
gonna save
miles
you
away from
be,
you. They
to
could be
be
miles away
closer
from
by.
you.
But it seems like there are definitely a lot of similarities in these two certifications versus, like, as far as safety and the CPR and first aid.
Right. The sailing certification is much more rigorous, and I'm supporting that. I mean, that's what it needs. All I'm saying is the other skills that are listed in terms of, are we sure that the certified sailing person has the same life-saving skills, not pushing out of the water, but in the event there is an emergency that needs to be dealt with out on a boat, does the sailing person have the same skills as a lifeguard who knows how to pull someone out of the water, produce a CPR, have the AED? I mean, do they have the same set of skills? I mean, that's all I really want to know. Not, it's not less the certification and more the skill set, and somehow validating that the person has that skill set.
May I make a comment?
Sure.
If in fact we were to have our sailing instructors also certified as lifeguards, we would essentially have to have every sailing instructor certified. Because we have usually a 1-to-3 or 1-to-4 instructor to student ratio. So there will be one instructor in a safety boat and then 3 kids or 2 kids in their little sailboats right next to that instructor. And so then you'd multiply that by every child in every little boat in our programs. And that would be a very onerous and challenging issue for us to be able to hire enough of those instructors who are doubly qualified.
Heather Nardoni, ratio-wise, you would only need 2, and I understand what you're saying, that if we're going to do it, it would make more sense for everyone to be certified. But I think with them being on the water, they could be radioed more easily to be able to go over than like if they're on the beach. So if they're already in the water, if there's 1 or 2 that are out there and there's a situation. And again, the differences are what's being done after somebody has drowned. I understand that everyone's CPR and AED certified, but there's other items that are included in lifeguarding and that are important.
I'm not trying to be dumb, but what other, I mean, I would think if somebody is drowning, the first thing that you would be doing is CPR. So I guess I don't understand. And I'm not trying to be a
Well, you
jerk.
would know
I'm just
better than
trying
me,
to-
but from what I read, it's when someone inhales water, it's knowing the signs that they are breathing again after inhaling water, rather than specific to cardiac arrest, like their heart just stops out of nowhere. But I might be completely wrong. You would know better. I'm not a medical person, so that's on me. I guess my main point here too is creating precedent for Nantucket. And again, there's hundreds of sailing camps in Massachusetts. We've spoken to the state about this. This isn't a variance that's granted anywhere else. So that's just another really big point. And I think there's a reason for that. And I also agree that we might not understand completely the differences between both. Like, we could go back and forth on that for a while, but it's that it's not done anywhere else either. And I feel like there's a reason for that.
So how do other sailing camps do this? They have every single one of or they just have 1 or 2?
They just follow the state ratios, which I believe is 1 to 25.
Yeah.
I can
I'm
answer
sorry,
that
that's you.
question because I've talked to several of the other community sailing organizations in the state, and I've talked to all of the accredited community sailing organizations in the state. And most of them were waived even getting certified as a recreational camp for children by their local Board of Health because they felt that they were already accredited by the U.S. Sailing Association, which is the governing board for the sport for the country. So I can see why the people at the State Department of Health might not know about it because they aren't even on the list.
Does anybody else have Malcolm, sorry.
No, as we did last year, I'm quite comfortable with granting this variance. I think the instructors are as well qualified. I think as pointed out that a lot of towns don't even go this far because they're already certified with the Sailing Association. I'm comfortable with the variance.
And if I could just point out, there is precedence because it was approved last year, so.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with it too, both as a nurse practitioner and as a sailor. The important thing is that in a accident, that somebody gets to that person as quickly as possible. And there would be no way in a 1 to 25 situation that you could get to somebody quickly who might be a mile or more away from you. And so I am very comfortable approving this variance.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the variance as requested.
Is there a second? I'll second it.
And I would just like to point out that there is more than one sailing camp, so this will probably come up again.
We are the only accredited U.S. sailing organization on Nantucket.
Oh, that's good to know. I agree.
Yeah,
I think
yes,
that,
I'm making this motion based on the fact they are an accredited camp. And to me, that would be the minimum that we would give this variance to anybody else.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Can we vote on it? Jim?
I'm sorry, but I know from personal experience how fast things can change, so I have to vote no.
Meredith?
I,
Malcolm?
Aye.
Carrie?
No.
Anne? Aye. So that's 3-2.
Yep. Passes.
The variance is approved.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
I'm going to continue my vacation.
I thought you said 7. It's only 6 here.
It's 7 where I am.
All right, Malcolm. All right.
It is my vacation. Come on.
All right, all right, all right.
I'll see you next month.
Thank you. Maybe we can get through the rest of this really quickly. Number 10, 6 Totemo Way, a nitrogen loading credit.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to speak. Jeff's, Blackwell's here from Blackwell and Associates.
Hello, Jeff Blackwell for the owner and applicant. We are applying for a variance from the Hummock Pond Watershed District nitrate loading limitation. The history of this property was it was granted and installed a septic system prior to 1995 under the previous Title V code, and a certificate of compliance was issued. The property was not constructed, as it remained vacant since the code change, and now property is proposed to be developed, and with the new Title V code and also the Nantucket Board of Health codes, this variance is required. It is proposed to install an IA septic system of the same number of bedrooms as was previously approved, 4 bedrooms. And in the intervening years, town water has been run to this area, and all the surrounding properties are connected to town water. So we're not proposing any more in the number of bedrooms that was previously approved under the old code. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to address.
So if I have a chance to speak, Jeff's office, Chris from Jeff's office gave me a call this afternoon or late this morning, I should say, and let me know that a 4-bedroom system was actually installed on the property back in 1990 for 4 bedrooms. It was installed and a certificate of compliance was issued by the health department. So that, in a sense, solidifies the property for the nitrogen loading based on that permit in 1990. So that was an error of mine of not seeing that in the file, just because I didn't see a house on the property and thought it was vacant and didn't do enough research in the file. So essentially, they're not adding any bedrooms from technically the system that exists now, just with no dwelling on it. So you know, I see this as an improvement from what currently exists, although a dwelling doesn't exist.
So they put in a septic system and just never built a house, and it's been sitting there for 30-something years and never
That's-
been used?
That's correct.
And
Yep.
how do you know that a septic system that's been just sitting in the ground for 30 years is okay to use? And I'm not, again, not asking that in a
No, it's a
condescending
curious-
way. I'm
Yeah.
just curious because I would think that things degrade and
Well, that system's going to be taken out, and they're going to install a new system, an IA. So, you know, geez, 35 years ago, right? 35 years ago. And in the 80s, and I'm sure Jeff can comment more than I can, but this was kind of a practice back then to kind of solidify the number of bedrooms allowed on properties of this size. So it's not the first time I've seen something like this, especially in the Nantucket area, particularly back in 1995 before the code changed with the loading rates. So, you know, it's not frequent, but not rare, so.
So it's a three-bedroom house right now.
There's a zero house right now, but there's a 4-bedroom system which currently exists and was
in-house.
permitted back in 1990.
And how many bathrooms are going, how many bedrooms are going in the new house?
It will be limited to 4 bedrooms. Yep.
Okay.
So what do we need to do?
Well, I got some questions.
Oh,
It's scary. So because they sunk a tank in the 90s for 4 bedrooms that don't exist, we have to grant them 4 bedrooms. Is that correct?
Once the system's in and signed off on, then yes, I mean, by Title V, that would be allowed.
Okay. And so the next second question is, is the leaching field in the ideal location based upon there's a swimming pool being put in too? I mean, we've had this before where people did stuff because they didn't want their pool disturbed. And are we in that game on this one too, or is this leaching field ideally situated? Given the size of the lot too.
I mean, I can comment and say it meets all the setbacks and everything, so it's not the town served by town water, as well as the lot to the west and the lot to the south, so it's not affecting any nearby wells.
Okay.
So it's got a regular system and then now 4 bedrooms, and they're gonna take it out and put in a regular 4-bedroom, or they're gonna put an IA?
Yep, it's an IA. Yep.
But it's gonna be restricted to 4 bedrooms.
Yes, yep.
Okay, so they're not gonna be able to add on later on saying, well, we'll put an IA in there, so we want another bedroom.
Nope, so just as, you know, if this is approved the way it is for 4, it's 4 for the end of our lifetimes,
Okay.
just the way that it was done in 1990,
Okay.
so.
Yeah. Does a 10,000 square foot per bedroom apply in this particular watershed, or is that a Nantucket one or?
10,000 does apply to Hummock Pond. The board in the past has granted variances in Hummock Pond and the wellhead for installation of an IA for the bedroom credits. Nantucket and Nantucket Harbor watershed are strictly limited to 10,000, no matter what system.
Okay, thank you.
what action is required here?
Make a motion to accept the variance request.
Is it a
proposed?
variance?
It's kind of difficult because it's kind of an upgrade as well.
Well, yeah, originally it was a variance request until you got more, accurate information about the hidden tank.
Right. I mean, it does say, on the plan, it made reference to no system serving new construction or, sorry. or repair or something.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Well, is a variance needed given the fact that that tank was found and approved by the Board of Health? I mean, does that kind of mean that there is no variance actually was required in this particular situation, or is it because it's a watershed issue?
I mean, yeah, it's a watershed's a local regulation, so it not really, it doesn't. I mean, this regulation didn't exist, well, geez, I'd have to go back in the 90s for that. Yeah, I mean, essentially, it's an upgrade. If there was a house there and it failed, it would be an upgrade to a new system, to this system, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm just trying, I want to make sure we approve what's supposed to be approved. That's all. If it's a variance or if it's just approving the plans as they presented in the Hummock water pond, watershed area. That's all. It's just a matter of, clarification of what we're approving.
I'm just unclear what action
Yeah,
we
that's,
need to take. That's all.
If I may, this is a request for a variance.
Oh, okay.
So it would be appropriate for the motion to approve the variance for this system on this property.
Okay, is there a motion?
yeah, I mean, a motion to approve the variance as stated in the application.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Jim?
Yes.
Meredith?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes.
Ann? Yes. Okay,
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
all right. We're getting there. Lift condemnation of 40R, Essex Road.
Yeah, so John is most familiar with this agenda item, so I'll let him address.
So this was, a housing complaint that we responded to about a year and a half ago of some occupants that were living down in a basement with no heat. There's no access to a kitchen. Those were the two major things. And we were recently back there a few weeks ago. We re-inspected, and one of the rooms now, it does have egress and heat was installed. There's still no access to a kitchen in the basement area, so there's no direct access to a kitchen. So that can't be used as like a rental or sleeping purposes, but the room does meet, habitation code to be an office or something. You need, one egress window out and another egress out, outside the hall. So it would be allowed to have something, like I said, as an office or room of that nature, but it's still not allowable for sleeping purposes or as a separate standalone rental unit, as there's no access to a kitchen there.
But it allows us to lift the
Yeah.
condemnation.
Yeah, so it allows to lift the condemnation of that room to be used for habitable space.
Okay, should we go ahead and do that? Motion?
Motion to lift the condemnation of 40R Essex Road.
Second.
All in favor? Carrie?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Meredith?
Aye.
And aye. That's done. 12. Okay, online sharing of health department data.
Yes, so on the call is Andrew Shapiro, and he will be representing the health department in this agenda item. So Andrew, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Can you all hear me? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Hi, thanks for having me here. Thanks to the board. This update is related to PFAS data sharing. I also have a few points that relate to how we analyze and visualize that data. So bear with me. I'll have updates on data sharing as well as a few other PFAS related items. First, me and the rest of the team working on PFAS presented at the select board last night. We had updates on the landfill, wastewater treatment facility, public drinking water supply, and the 24G fairgrounds investigation. So if anyone is interested in that information, that select board is recorded and available online. So please feel free to take a look at that and reach out later if you have any questions from me. So moving on to data sharing. A couple of weeks ago, we met with Mass DEP. We had initially reached out to them because we were interested in updating our fact sheet about what to do with your PFAS results. And it ended up being a very impactful and important meeting. So I'm going to use that as kind of a guide to talk through a couple of things. So first, we found out that Mass DEP has a release tracking number associated with their island-wide investigation of PFAS. For those unfamiliar with that term, this is the code that Mass DEP uses to identify investigations under the Massachusetts Contingency Plan. So with that release tracking number, we discovered over 100 sampling results online that we hadn't seen before. And that data was not redacted in any way. So this made us think that we needed to change our policy on sharing of PFAS data. So after talking with town council, this has led us to the decision that we will be posting PFAS sampling results in property files. So I have a number of emails that have come up since I've been in meetings this afternoon, and I'm going to be working on that tomorrow and next week. I have to coordinate with IT and town administration, but we are intending to put the PFAS sampling results that we've received from voluntary samples as well as the private well regulations in the town property files. In addition to that, learning about this release tracking number with Mass DEP, we created a new web page to link to the databases for all 4 PFAS release sites on the island. In addition to that, we created a map that plots all of the data from the voluntary sampling and private well regulations. I'm going to get to that a little bit. If it's okay with the board, I'll plan to share my screen after a few additional updates. So in addition to deciding to post data in public property files, the Mass DEP meeting also instilled in us that we should still be using the 20 nanograms per liter threshold in our analyses. So when I share my map later, that is the threshold that I will be using. And this is the recommendation from Mass DEP. I also have been thinking a lot about how to reconcile the EPA MCL of 4 parts per trillion for PFOA and PFOS, and the threshold of 20 for the PFAS 6 in Massachusetts. Definitely the headline numbers seem quite different. 4 parts per trillion for the federal standard and 20 parts per trillion for the state standard. But it's important to keep in mind that the EPA standard refers to 1 individual species, so a threshold as low as 4 for PFOA and PFOS, versus a threshold of 20 for 6 compounds. So we're talking 4 for 1 compound, 20 for the sum of 6. So they're not quite as different as they seem. The EPA threshold is a little bit more sophisticated than the state standard in that it weights PFAS according to their toxicity. I think this is pretty important, but the EPA standard has a very, very major shortcoming. The EPA and the Mass DEP standards look at different species of PFAS. In particular, Mass DEP regulates PFHPA and PFDA, which are not regulated by EPA. And the lack of the regulation of PFDA by the EPA is particularly concerning. EPA has toxicity-based screening levels for unregulated contaminants, including PFDA. And PFDA has one of the lowest values of all contaminants in EPA's database of environmental contaminants. It includes 800 or so environmental contaminants, and PFDA is just about near the very bottom with a threshold value even lower than PFOA and PFOS. So all that is to say that I commend Mass DEP for having one of the most health protective standards in the country and for thinking about contaminants that EPA is not thinking about. I know that Mass DEP is planning to update their standards according to the federal MCLs, but I'm definitely curious to see what Mass DEP does about PFHPA and PFDA, and I would definitely strongly encourage them to continue to regulate those contaminants. A couple of other things came out of that meeting with Mass DEP, a few minor procedural updates. We will be updating our fact sheet on what to do with your PFAS results, but Mass DEP has expressed that they prefer that we email Navpreet Balowski, who is, I believe, the section chief, and there's no need for a written notice, which was previously included on our informational fact sheet. EPA also asked us to include mention of point of use filters on our fact sheet. So for concentrations of less than the imminent hazard threshold of 90 nanograms per liter, EPA considers point of use filters to be suitable. So this includes countertop filters and things that might be installed on your sink rather than an outside home system. But for concentrations of greater than 90 nanograms per liter, Massachusetts will be helping residents find alternate sources of water, but they consider point of use filters insufficient in those cases. Mass DEP also clarified their procedures for their investigation. So as I mentioned before, they are conducting an island-wide investigation. They are setting up access agreements with individual property owners to help with their investigation. Homeowners are also required to report concentrations greater than 20 to Mass DEP. Additionally, if concentrations are detected above 90 nanograms per liter, the imminent hazard threshold, Mass DEP comes out to the island and retests to verify those results. And if those results are verified, Mass DEP works to identify an immediate alternate source of water. In addition to that, if the imminent hazard threshold is exceeded, Mass DEP also sets up access agreements with abutters, typically out to 500 feet. So all of that being said, I am going to share some of the data that we have. Madam Chair, is it okay for me to do a screen share?
Yes.
Thank you. So I'm going to be sharing some data. Hold on, I'm looking for the functionality. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, we can see it now.
Great. So big caveat on this data before we jump in. This is data related to voluntary sampling as well as sampling under our private well regulations. This does not include data associated with the 4 MCP sites. That the overview of those MCP sites is included on this page for those interested in the airport, for example. But overall, the health department has received 84 samples, and PFAS have been detected in a fair amount of those, but less than the majority of those samples. The PFAS 6 MCL, the state standard, has been exceeded in 7 of those samples, or about 8% of the samples. And the maximum detected concentration in this data set is 43 nanograms per liter. I understand that on the island, concentrations well in excess of 43 have been detected, and those are associated with those MCP sites on the island. So here's just another way of looking at this data. This is a histogram that shows the distribution of data that we have seen. So again, you'll see that 61% of the data was non-detect, and a relatively small percent of the data exceeded the reportable concentration of 20 nanograms per liter. None of the data exceeded the imminent hazard threshold of 90 nanograms per liter. And this might be what folks are most interested in. We were able to create a map of this data. So I'm going to zoom in on this. And, oh, that's a little too zoomed in. Here we go. So we plotted all of the locations on the island in this data set where the reportable concentration of 20 nanograms per liter was exceeded. And we identified 2 clusters of data where that has occurred. So one of those is in Nantucket, where we have 5 exceedances of the 20 part per trillion threshold. But it's also important to know that there's actually quite a bit of heterogeneity in this buffer. I'm using a half-mile buffer around detects of 20 nanograms per liter or more. But you can see that in this small area, there are non-detects, there are detects that are less than the reportable concentration, and there are also detects above the reportable concentration of 20 nanograms per liter. And I'm showing these buffers to protect the identity of these well owners. That being said, that data is soon going to be available in the property files. We identified another location where PFAS were detected in excess of the reportable concentration of 20 nanograms per liter. This is slightly cut off on my screen, but again, you can see that there is heterogeneity here. There is a mix of non-detects, a mix of low-level detects, and 2 locations that exceed the reportable concentration of 20. We also have summary statistics outside of these buffers. So by definition, the buffers contain all samples that were above the threshold of 20. And you can see that outside of these buffers, there's a mix of non-detects as well as detects below the threshold of 20. So there's quite a range of data here. I definitely, I respect concerns about detects that are below the threshold of 20, but are detected nonetheless. So a couple notes on that. Just a reminder that PFAS are basically ubiquitous in the environment. PFAS have been detected in rain. PFAS are detected in 99% of people's blood in the US. As we mentioned at the select board last night, we have also been to a number of conferences recently, and some of them have been particularly eye-opening. One, we heard from a regulator at the New Hampshire DES who was measuring domestic wastewater. So basically the water that flows into a septic system, and they had detected concentrations of over 100 parts per trillion for total PFAS. And so that was really eye-opening in thinking about what kinds of concentrations you can expect in the environment. Obviously, a wastewater stream of 100 parts per trillion isn't going to cause the groundwater to have that same detection. There's going to be some dilution when the wastewater hits the groundwater, but it's something that's really important to keep in mind when we're looking at data like this. And I'll add one more comment for context. In our data set, 39% of wells had a detection of PFAS. The USGS recently estimated that 45% of people in the country have detectable levels of PFAS in their water. Again, all of this is excluding the 4 MCP sites, but this covers the data set that we have from voluntary testing and private well sampling. That was a long update. Please let me know if you have any questions.
I have questions. Can I go?
Yeah, please.
I just would like to make sure that we are not saying, oh, you're under 20, you're okay. Regardless, there is no level of PFAS that is safe. So saying, oh, well, all of these places were under 20, I'm sorry. This is my soapbox, and I said this last night. No level is safe. So as the health department, we shouldn't be saying, oh, your level is under 20. Like, it was detected there. And if it was detected in a home, we need to be making, I think that the state says, everyone aware with a private well within 1 to 2 miles. Well, this island isn't very big, so that's a lot of letters. But like, people need to know. People are making bottles for their children, for their newborns, with formula, with water from the tap. And if their well is contaminated and they don't know it, then they're giving their newborn PFAS. And long term, we know that this is going to cause issues. We know that this is going to increase the likelihood of them developing different diseases, different types of cancers. There's a lot of research going on about this. So I really would like to see Nantucket stop saying 20 like it's not a big number when it is a big number. And I don't care what the makeup is. We should be saying, if it is yes, you have PFAS in your water, then like, here are steps you should take. I know that you can go and get your blood level tested, because I have done it. And, having a meeting with the hospital and saying to the providers, here are a list. I watched this amazing CME that I sent to all of you. Here are things that you should look for. Like, if your water comes back and has PFAS, because you might have a PFAS level of 10, but you've been drinking that water for 30 years. And that's going to have an effect on you. I feel like we really need, this is really, really important and is going to put people at risk. And already there is a high incidence of cancer in the Cape and Islands compared to other parts of the state. So like, let's say, here are things that you can do. Let's talk to the providers. Like, let's get this whole community into like, what are things we can do to decrease our exposure? And if your neighbor tests positive, you should know.
Yeah, Madam Chair, can I respond to that, please?
Yes, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks for your comments. I will argue that the composition actually does matter quite a bit. EPA has concluded that PFOA and PFOS are likely to be carcinogenic. EPA has established that there's no safe level of exposure to PFOA and PFOS. EPA has actually established safe levels of exposure for the other 4 regulated compounds under the MCL. And we have to recognize that many PFAS have different levels of toxicity. So if you look at the hazard index calculation, you'll see that PFBS, for example, is much, much less toxic than Gen X, for example. It differs by an order of magnitude. EPA also has residential screening levels, which are risk-based screening levels available for unregulated contaminants. And you'll see that many of those order by very many orders of magnitude. Some of them are in the micrograms per liter range, so they're 1,000 times safer than the PFAS that we're looking at on a regulated basis. That being said,
no offense, Andrew, but you're not here drinking this water. So I understand, I know all of this, but this is, I would urge you to reach out to Graham Peasley at Notre Dame, who does a bunch of research on this, and he has said there is no good PFAS. So saying a little bit is okay is, I just not okay with me.
And if I can just speak, I don't think that I have ever said, or the health department has ever said, that there is good PFAS, or that there is any, the goal is always going to be 0. And we offer consultation on, that's why Andrew's put so much work into describing the problem and creating educational material. And that is what we can do as a public health department. And, making these results available is something that you've been asking for and others have been asking for. And so we've
I appreciate
done
all
that.
this.
But we've never put ourselves, and nor have I personally said that there is a good PFAS or that something is acceptable. We are reporting scientific results made available from the authorities that are the state and the federal government. And so I don't ever want to give the impression that we're saying it's okay. We're not.
Yeah, and I'll add a few additional things to that. I understand that people should be aware about PFAS, whether it's at low levels or whether it's at levels above the 20 nanogram per liter threshold. And this map does exactly that. Here you can see where PFAS have been detected above that threshold. And you can also see where the PFAS have been detected in areas outside of these buffers. And anyone is welcome to come to the health department and order a PFAS sample. People also, it's their prerogative to buy a point of use filter if they're concerned about their PFAS exposures.
Yeah. Hi, Andrew. Carrie. I'm one of the
Yeah.
Zoom
Hi,
people.
Carrie.
How you doing? First, thank you. I live in Nantucket, and I'm actually supposedly one of the numbers that are on the thing. I guess I'm looking at the sample size for Nantucket, and it seems small because I know a whole bunch of people who have tested because we're all neighbors. We all told each other to test. Plus, with real estate transfers since the first of 2024, so I'm just not sure if that's if I'm assuming these are Mass DEP as a source, that it's captured all of the actual testing. The number of, I think it was 20 roughly for, no, it was about 15, I think, for Matticat.
Yeah.
That just seems like there's a lot more testing that's going on there with between real estate transfers and people I know because our street is one of the ones that is is working to get town water because of PFAS. So is there a way to know that that is the real sample size?
Yeah, it's a good point, Carrie. This is the data that I have regarding voluntary sampling. People aren't required to send those samples to us. And so if people are doing it on a voluntary basis and they don't send it to the health department, it wouldn't be reflected here.
Okay.
And Carrie, as we get more results, I think this data will be more telling. But obviously, we're relying on what's being reported to us. And so and right on the website, it says it's not necessarily representative of all results in the area.
Okay, but it does bring us back. I know this question's been asked. When a test is done, by an outside lab and the results are high, does Mass DEP and the Nantucket Board of the Health Department, do they receive the results or is it dependent upon the owner to report?
If they picked up a sample from us, we would most likely get it. I have found that I don't get copied on all emails. Sometimes John Hedden forwards them to me.
Yeah.
Again, voluntary samples, people aren't required to send them to us and they might not make their way to us.
Okay. Okay. So I mean, that might be why the sample size just seems not as robust as it should be.
Yeah, but if you do get a hit of PFAS above the 20 nanogram per liter threshold, you are required to report it to Mass DEP.
Okay, so I'll talk to the neighbors and see if they've
Yeah.
reported. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Can I jump back to one more thing Meredith said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Meredith, I really like your idea of reaching out to clinicians. So I would love to hear some recommendations on how to do that better.
I will share with you the PFAS Action Group put together a continuing medical education all about PFAS and if you've been exposed, what you should do, and speaking with your provider. That was really excellent. And they have a lot of resources because I think we as a community need to be aware of our exposure levels because one of those circles is all a bunch of mid-island.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm meeting with the PFAS Action Group in person next week. So I'll ask them about that. Any additional questions?
Will you guys be, so as you get them with house transfers, you'll be putting them in the folders. Are the folders electronic and available? And would you be plotting any of that in areas on a map or?
Well, they'll be in the folders, so
Okay.
anybody has access to them, and the online folders, yes, they can get to them. And what you'll see here is these types of maps here that identify areas that include numbers.
Yep, I need to think of a cadence to update this map. I'll certainly be updating it ASAP as soon as I receive any results that are greater than the 20, and then maybe a little less frequently if the results continue to be below that threshold.
Okay, it's Carrie again, question. You're only getting, it seems as though all results should be reported. So the 20, above 20, it seems like we should have them all so we can have a clear sample of what is happening as opposed to just selected ones.
Oh yeah, I intend to update this regularly, but I get new data quite frequently. And so I need to think about what the best schedule is to update this map in particular. So what I'm saying is I will update it ASAP if samples are above the 20 part per trillion threshold, and maybe I'll update it monthly otherwise to roll together all the other PFAS. I'm not gonna be able to update this map every single day as new data come in.
I'm not expecting that, but so I guess what I'm like is that that what we're using as a sample is all of the results, and some are going to be above, some are below, but we have all the results as the basis for our sample.
All the
That's all
results
I'm wondering.
make their way to the property files, even if it's
Yeah.
an undetect.
Okay.
So,
Yeah,
so
thank
Kara, I
you.
think I know what you're asking, and what I'll say is that what's required is what's in health regulations, which is results associated with transfers. So there's other results that Andrew displayed are results that were basically either voluntarily sent to us or went through the health department's facilitation of sending the water up for sampling, and we were copied on those results. So yes, we agree with you that we would love to see them all, but certainly all that are above 90 must be reported according to state regulations to Mass DEP, but that doesn't exist for just zero results or lower non-detected types of results that are on Nantucket.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
I have one final question for you, Andrew. I think what we heard, your presentation was really complete and wonderful. What we heard is that people will now be able to see the results of testing, which is what so many people had asked us to be able to do. Is that correct?
Yep, that's the main point.
How would they see them? How would they find that out?
They'll be in the town property files where there's other data such as septic information.
So they would need to go to a specific property address?
Yep, that's right.
So all of our, sorry.
No, go on.
Yeah, go
All
ahead,
of our
John.
files are online, department files, Board of Health files, and they're filed by properties, by map and parcel. So
Okay.
any address, you look up the map and parcel, typically from the GIS maps, just as if you're going to planning and land use, you'd want to go look at your building file, you'd give them the map and parcel and pull out your property file for the building department or something like that. So luckily ours are all online through Laserfiche, so you'd have
Okay.
to just search that way.
Secondly, in communicable diseases, certain communicable diseases, Rocky knows this probably better than anybody, there are certain reportable things that if you are a partner of or a close contact of, you get notified by the Department of Health that you have, and it's can be done anonymously by the Department of Health in certain cases. Is that a possibility for us to actually notify an abutter or somebody who is very close to a place where there has been not above 90, but a significant test result?
Yeah, so I think you touched on it, but that's kind of analogous to the imminent hazard threshold of 90. And in that case, Mass DEP reaches out to abutters to set up access agreements to conduct additional sampling.
That wasn't quite my question.
I think I understand what your question was. And so, that's, we're still thinking about how best to do that in absence of sending out, thousands
Guess
of letters
what?
to in a scenario where in certain areas there's nobody that's there during the winter months.
Oh.
And so we're thinking about how best to notify, but certainly if anybody has any concerns about their drinking water, they can have it tested. And so the idea that we need to be reaching out to everybody, every neighbor that's within a mile, is certainly possible, but we have to think about how best to do that. I think that it's a challenge.
Okay, I just think some people might not know to even be concerned until they heard from
And don't, I
you
mean,
guys.
if it's not your primary residence, I would assume you would have your mail forwarded or have, or their addresses are on the GIS of who owns the house and where the, I mean, that information is all publicly available.
And we'd send it to whatever was publicly available.
Yeah.
But, like I said, if we don't know how accurate those addresses are.
I guess I would be concerned that we aren't doing it because there might be people who don't live here year round who might not get their mail. Like, and I am just saying, I think that we should just, you send it out and then if it gets sent back, I mean, there's other to the publicly available information.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's important to notify
So we're
people
working on
to the
it.
ability that
We're
we
working
can.
on it.
And we're thinking about
working
how
on it.
best to do that.
Okay, last question. If we went to any town USA, XYZ Kansas, what kinds of PFAS levels would we find there? In other words, what I'm trying to, I know you showed Nantucket versus, I think, other place in Massachusetts. Is this I guess I'm trying to determine, do we have a bigger problem than a lot of other places, or do we have a problem that's less than a lot of other places, or is it just sort of universal?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Mass DEP and UMass did sampling on Nantucket and collected about 41 samples. They also collected data in 84 other municipalities around the state. I have more details on that somewhere, but I think top of my head, about 20 something of those towns had PFAS detected above the MCL, and the max data point, max result in Nantucket was something like 40 or 50 nanograms per liter in that particular study. And the max detected PFAS concentration around the state was something like 1,600 parts per trillion. Granted, we have concentrations like that on Nantucket, and those are associated with the 4 MCP sites, such as the airport.
So you're saying that in general, we have less of a problem than a lot of other places?
I looked at that data, and my general impression was that there is PFAS on Nantucket. Nantucket is not alone in that. And for towns that do have PFAS, Nantucket was pretty typical of other towns. And again, that's excluding the MCP sites. I would be happy to put more of that information on this website if there is interest. There was some concern that the Mass DEP data was maybe a little bit out of date and didn't reflect, latest sampling around the airport and Tom's Way and whatnot.
Okay.
Wasn't Tom's Way some of the highest reported in the state? I recall them saying that, and I believe that Matacasham Valley Road also was pretty up there.
Yep, and those are associated with those MCP sites.
Yeah, but I guess it's not worse than other places. It's
It's
just
hard.
not good.
It's hard to say. And I
Okay.
mean,
Depends where you live.
you're asking
Yeah.
for comprehensive data. I think certainly what I have read was those Western Massachusetts communities had the higher levels.
Okay.
But like I said,
Okay.
it's very hard to
All right.
pinpoint a
Well,
number
it's
and
not
say
good anywhere,
we're
but-
better or we're worse.
Yeah,
We
it just-
have it, and just like many other communities do.
Yeah, and I
Okay,
just,
number 13.
yeah, and as Carrie, as much out there, just,
Oh,
again,
sorry.
we've been talking about, testing, that, testing does cost.
Yep.
It is, 260 or something like dollars. And again, I know the
That's
town,
right.
we actually are cheaper because of how we got it set up, but it does cost. And that, when we say homeowners should go get tested, that they need to understand that it's not just walk in and it gets tested for free. It does cost them.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Absolutely. Yep. Okay, 13. So this was a public hearing that was advertised this last month, I guess 3 weeks ago, and it was pertaining to some observations that were made that John hadn't made and others regarding some of the definitions in our regulations, and the goal here was to simplify them because as you develop regulations over periods of time, you have redundancies in wanting to make this less confusing for those that may read it. And so I'll just turn to John here and let him kind of introduce this topic.
Yeah, so, thank you. Yeah, this is just kind of a, more or less a streamline kind of this definition section of chapter 223, which it really pertains to septic systems and everything. So what I wanted to do was, there's a lot of redundant definitions in here that are already in Title V, so I didn't see the need to keep those in the regulation. These definitions are just an addition to Title V. So you'll see a lot of crossouts. Yep, so the crossouts are already word for word in Title V. So I didn't see a need to keep those in this regulation when we can just say this is an addition to the definitions found in Title V. Thank you. So when I took a few definitions from natural resources, when we make reference to coastal banks, you'll see that. Those are taken directly from our natural resources department's their definitions. Some of the biggest changes were definition of bedroom. This always comes up when we're discussing reviewing building applications and floor plans to ensure that they're compliant with the septic system. Title V has its own definition of a bedroom, and this is an expansion off of that. It's kind of a little bit of a tricky language and formula if you're not really familiar with it. So I tried to kind of clean that up a little bit based on how it's historically been through the health department here on Nantucket. Stuff like we see sleeping lofts, and they're saying it's for storage, and I've been in many homes where I see the beds are up in the loft, and it's essentially that's an extra bedroom if you have two people up there, and bottom line, it comes into water usage from the house and what's going into the leach field. That's what's going to be the life and pollutants of the septic system. Another thing we kind of see a lot with our review of floor plans is the previous definition was if the room is one open room, that it counts as, if it's a kitchen, living, dining, and it's one big room with I think it was undivided walls, or undivided, no walls dividing the rooms, it counts as one room, which is always a bit of a arbitrary kind of interpretation, just in my experiences over the years. I found another definition from another town with the open floor plans, which kind of really addresses that and kind of gets more to the uses of the room. So, a kitchen, in my opinion, is presumed to also have a dining room. So to me, that makes sense. But a living room, to me, is a separate use from kitchen and dining, of course. So I've always kind of thought that, it should really kind of be based off of usage instead of, the walls and whether it's labeled one room or two rooms. So, so I thought that would help kind of clean up those situations that we see with people. So, yeah, that's been in there if it's a full bathroom. If there's a full bathroom in the basement with finished space, it counts as a bedroom, just because it's. Well, if you have the room in your septic system, you can. But if say you had a playroom, or we see floor plans where it says office, and there's a full bathroom right connected to it. Kind of looking more like a bedroom than an office on Nantucket, you know? So it's just kind of a way to really clear that up, in my opinion. You know, we see a lot of designs where there's full bathrooms, you know, on the first floor with an office connected to a full bath. And again, it's, you know, a lot of office with direct access to a full bathroom is looks more like bedroom to me. But, you know, and as we're fully aware, we had the long discussion earlier in this meeting of, you know, probably the primary usage of 80% of the houses here. So let's see, and new construction was another kind of bigger change where changes were made. Okay, well, I won't keep talking if everyone's read it, but, you know, as Rocky and I have spoke, you know, it would need final review by town council just to make sure that there's nothing wrong with it, I suppose, legally.
So when that gets finalized, I mean, that'll change, that'll be it from now on.
Yeah, so, you know, with the board's approval, we can send this to town council and get their feedback, put it on the agenda for next month for a final approval, and, you know, finalize it then as a local regulation. Kerry had his hand up.
Yeah, and again, John, you and I sent you an email about, just some questions, about, the term leaching field is mentioned but not defined, and you said, that, to fix that by calling it a soil absorption system. And then some of the abbreviations that P stand, that somewhere it's like there's P's and N's next to things, and it wasn't clear. So if those could be cleared up, in the next version, so that, we know exactly what what those references are, that would help a lot. And then the last thing, which, I brought this up before, and I brought it up when I emailed you, was that whole concept of removing wetlands as usable space and leaching fields. But you had suggested that there was a better place for that to be. So those were the two things, so defining leaching, or somehow making sure that word is, that we understand what that is a soil absorption system or whatever, do a cross reference, and then where there's abbreviations for something, just to kind of say what those abbreviations mean.
Okay, yep, absolutely. And yeah, I based kind of on that point, Kerry. I thought I added something in here, but I did speak with Natural Resources a little bit, just because I want to be on the same page with them on their definition of wetland and what would be the definition of wetland in our regulation. Ours kind of is a catch-all definition, which basically, defers to what their definition is. So I think it's kind of covered. Well, that's spelled out in that specific regulation. That's also a good point. Another thing I did do with this was I did take definitions out of other regulations and just added them into this section. So it's just kind of a separate definition section. But, the tight tank regulation was recently approved with its own definitions in there as well. So, we'd have to go back and change that. So it would, maybe down the road.
Yeah. Okay. No, thank you.
So if you would like more time to provide comments to John, if you haven't had an opportunity to read that closely, just tell us how much time you need, and we will then send it on to the town council for, I guess, final review and bring it back next month.
I'm okay with sending it on.
I was going to make a motion to approve pending town council. Is that the
Do we
correct
need a
motion?
or?
I think you just motion to continue it to next month because it's not final. I mean, I guess you can make that motion to
Motion to continue to next
continue to
month?
next month.
What would that mean, though?
Yeah, but I mean, I read it, I thought it also
Okay,
that
well
it
I
was
then,
thought it was
great.
fun.
absolutely,
Yeah.
then, yeah,
I'd
then I
love to
think that's
have- move
fine.
So
along.
I think you
motion-
can make 2 motions.
Motion to approve pending for town council to review, is that?
I think you might leave it open just so it does come back to the meeting.
Yeah, so they
for-
wouldn't, they're not closing the hearing here.
Let's
We're
move it
continue.
to
Just move to send,
sending it on to the town council for review, right?
Right.
So
with-
motion to send to town council for
with,
review.
with Carrie's edits that I mentioned.
Yeah, okay. Jim, you seconding that? Okay. All in favor, Carrie?
Yes.
Meredith?
Yes.
Jim? Ann? Yes. Okay.
All right.
Lucky, you're
I
on.
will be quick. I always feel like
You're
I'm
on.
rushed
I
here.
know, we're gonna
but-
put you first
But that's
next time.
okay.
are.
So I just want to touch quickly on flu, our total flu. So from November the 1st through really today, we've had 410 cases, confirmed cases. So obviously the number is going to be much higher in the community, probably to the tune of about 6,000 or 7,000. But based on estimates from CDC, where it's 20 times as high as what your actual confirmed cases are. But the good news is that cases have dropped off significantly over the last couple of weeks, and you probably have known that from speaking to people in the community, but we were getting 26, 27 cases per day being reported. And over the last couple of weeks, we've had anywhere from 0 to 13 cases with a median of 6. So it certainly seems to be dropping off, which is good news. There was a recent report in, I think, the Boston Globe about Massachusetts overall, where they still have a lot of flu being reporting a second surge of cases. But I hope that this trend continues, but we will continue to monitor. Do you have a question?
No, I was going to say I would bet that we'll see a second surge after February break.
Well, let's yeah.
Hopefully not,
We will
because
be
I
monitoring
saw a
it
lot
and-
of it.
And hope for the best, yes. Let's see, short-term rentals, 869 is the current total. Serve Safe class planned for April the 2nd through the 4th. So we're trying to find a sweet spot for when people are arriving back on island that are going to be in need of this course and them actually opening up. And so that's a week that John has been working with. I think Jake and Heather are going to be teaching that class. So tell your friends. Yeah, I think it's a great class to have, and it's needed on the island. Let's see. We saw recently a Massachusetts cancer incidence data, which was just released a couple of days ago, and it's dated. So the most recent data was from 2016 to 2020. And I know, speaking to Malcolm and others previously, from the prior cycle, which was 2011 to 2015, there was concern around melanoma or skin cancer being excessively high on the island and trying to understand why. So happy to report that from 2016 to 2020, that number went down by 2/3. And so that's good news. Started looking at the data, and we'll include that in some of our educational material that we send out to the community. And I know Carrie would be interested in this, a community needs assessment, that's in process. So that is his funding has been allocated for that. So they're in the process of identifying a contractor or actually releasing an RFP. And so that will be coming. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to talk more to you about that later. And that's all I have. I'll stop there unless you have any questions for me.
Questions?
Oh, I have a question. Did we have any cases of pertussis? Because I know that Barnstable County had about over 26 last
Yeah,
I
we
heard.
have not, and we've been monitoring that. We actually put some educational material out, and I think that was published in one of the papers, one of the local papers here, just letting people know that that vaccination is available. And it's important certainly for certain groups more than others, but it's good for everybody. But we have not had a reported case.
Gary?
Yeah, and this is more just, in the current climate concerning public health at the federal level, we'll need Rocky's guidance to, kind of navigate the waters because we want to maintain appropriate public health strategies in place on island. Funding and stuff may be affected. So just, asking for, we're going to need your good guidance, Rocky, on this one, okay?
Yeah, definitely, Carrie, and that is something we're paying close attention to. Obviously, we can fight the battles that we can fight
Right.
with the resources that we have available to us, and that is what we are going to focus on, and it's what we focus on always. But we are monitoring that situation closely.
Thank you.
That's all I
Okay.
got.
I think we might be finished.
Motion to adjourn.
Yes. Jim, second? Okay, all in favor? Carrie?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned at 7:01.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, I know. Oh, goodness. Well, we made it. I wasn't sure we would. I thought we might have to have a continuation. Yeah, well. Okay.
So we're good.
Yeah.
All right, stream ended.